Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are diving into the fascinating science of habit formation and looking at how incredibly small, seemingly insignificant, and consistent actions can actually lead to massive breakthroughs in your wealth, your health, and your everyday life. Let's jump right in.
Think about a scone cutter for a second. They can hit a rock 100 times, and literally nothing happens. No dent, no nothing. But on that 101st strike, boom, the rock splits right in two. Now, everyone celebrates that final hit as the magical moment of breakthrough, but we know it was the 100 unseen hits before it that actually made the rock break. It's such a common trap for us to get totally frustrated when our own hard work doesn't give us immediate results. But as the sources we're looking at today reveal, true progress is rarely a straight line. So here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the science of small habits, then tackle how to overcome the perfectionism trap. After that, we'll look at specific habits for financial wealth, move right into habits for cognitive health, and finally, wrap it up by building your own personalized habit system. Starting off with part 1, the science of small habits and how tiny changes compound. We really need to understand the basic mechanics of how habits actually work to see why we all get so easily discouraged right at the starting line. There is this brilliant analogy from James Clear, the author of Atomic Habits. He talks about something called the plateau of latent potential, or what I like to call the valley of disappointment. Imagine you're heating up an ice cube from 25 to 31 degrees. You are putting in all this energy, right? But looking at the ice cube, absolutely nothing is visibly happening. But here's the thing, that work isn't wasted. It's just being stored up. The energy builds and builds until you hit 32 degrees, and suddenly there is your breakthrough. It melts. When we're actually building these habits out in the real world, we can basically mash up two proven scientific theories. On one hand, we've got B.J. Fogg's tiny habits model. This is a super emotion-based approach. Fogg says we should start with behaviors so incredibly small they take almost zero effort, and then you explicitly celebrate them to wire in those feel-good emotions. On the other hand, we have James Clear's systems-based approach, which is all about engineering your physical environment and stacking new habits on top of old ones. So the real magic happens when you combine Fogg's emotional reinforcement with Clear's architectural system design. All right, moving to part 2, overcoming the perfectionism trap, or escaping the illusion. Because look, before we can build these awesome new systems, we absolutely have to dismantle the ultimate habit killer, and that is perfectionism. Now, perfectionism loves to disguise itself as ambition, doesn't it? But it's actually incredibly destructive to this whole tiny habit framework. Our sources highlight 3 major red flags to watch out for. First is a paralyzing fear of failure, where even the tiniest slip-up feels like a complete catastrophe. Second, setting totally unreasonable all-or-nothing goals. The whole, if I can't work out for an entire hour, I'm just not going to work out at all mindset. And third is being overly judgmental of yourself, making it nearly impossible to feel lasting satisfaction even when things go well. If you are constantly obsessing over mistakes, perfectionism is just actively sabotaging you while you're trying to get through that valley of disappointment. So how do we get out of this trap? Well, we have to recognize that perfection is just a straight-up illusion. What we really want to strive for is excellence. And here is the difference. Striving for excellence actually embraces the possibility of failure. It means accepting that doing your absolute best means you're going to mess up sometimes. You learn from it, you make a tiny adjustment, and you move forward. You simply cannot build tiny habits if you're demanding flawless perfection from yourself on day 1. That brings us to part 3, habits for financial wealth, building your safety net. Now that our mindset is dialed in on excellence rather than perfection, let's see how this compound effect applies to a massive pillar in our lives, which is creating financial wealth. Building real, lasting wealth doesn't start with getting lucky on some viral stock pick. It starts with a boring but absolutely essential foundational safety net. Our financial sources emphasize that you really need 3 to 6 months of essential living expenses tucked away in a dedicated emergency fund. Think of this as your shield. It's exactly what protects you from having to derail your long-term compounding investments when unpredictable life crises inevitably pop up. Once that safety net is in place, you've got to track where your money is actually going, because this is where you see tiny habits compounding negatively. Think about that $10 monthly subscription you completely forgot you even had. $10 feels like nothing in the moment, right? But that is $120 a year just silently draining out of your account. Over a decade, with lost investment potential, that tiny little oversight turns into a massive drain on your resources. We really have to audit these recurring behaviors. As you patch up those small leaks and move into actual investing, a fantastic tiny habit to adopt is to obsess over minimizing your fees. You want to look for low-cost index funds with expense ratios under 0.20%. And the why here is super simple. Every single fraction of a percent that you pay in fees is money yanked right out of your compound interest equation. Getting into the habit of keeping costs low guarantees that more of your own hard-earned money stays invested to grow for you. It helps to think of your financial journey in distinct stages. At the basic level, you automate. Set up systems to pay yourself first, literally routing money straight from your paycheck into your savings. Build up that emergency fund, and aggressively tackle any high-interest debt. Once those systems are humming along automatically, you graduate to the advanced habits, and arguably the most powerful one, avoiding lifestyle creep. That means deliberately keeping your living expenses steady even when your income grows, and funneling all that extra cash straight into your wealth-building engines. All right, on to part 4, habits for cognitive health, protecting your brain. Because just like our money compounds over time when we manage it right, so does our neurogenesis, which is the growth of new neurons in the brain. Let's take a look at this vital pillar. One of the biggest threats to our brain health as we get older is chronic stress, which can actually physically damage our brain structure. To protect crucial areas like the hippocampus, we need to get a handle on what neuroscientists call the default mode network. This is basically the system that goes into overdrive when you're ruminating on the past or stressing out about the future. Research strongly points to daily mindfulness meditation as a phenomenal tiny habit to quiet this network, lower your stress, and potentially slow down age-related cognitive decline. But cognitive health takes a much more holistic routine than just doing a daily crossword puzzle. Look at these fascinating daily habits. For instance, did you know that breaking a sweat, doing endurance exercise, actually releases a neuroprotective hormone called irisin that improves your memory? On top of that, doing completely unfamiliar, challenging things like picking up a new musical instrument, plus prioritizing sleep and keeping up strong social connections, these all actively strengthen the connectivity in your brain. Now, here is a truly wild fact from our sources. Just sitting on the couch, tapping away at a 2D brain training app on your phone, it's really not going to cut it. The cerebellum, which is often called the little brain, makes up only 10% of your brain's volume, but it houses over 50% of its total neurons. And to actually optimize those neurons, you cannot be sedentary. You literally have to get up, move around, break a sweat, and physically explore the complex, three-dimensional real world. Which brings us to our final section, part 5, building your habit system and putting it all into practice. So we've got the science, we've got the financial goals, and we know exactly what our brain needs. But how do we actually weave all this theory into our crazy daily grind without just getting completely overwhelmed? Well, taking a cue from James Clear's principles, you can build a really effective trigger system in your environment right now. Let's say you work from home. Create a physical trigger. Turn on a specific ring light or desk lamp to signal your brain, okay, work mode has started. And the second you turn it off, you are done. Deliberately hide extra notebooks to reduce visual clutter down to just one item. And try a tiny habit like closing unused browser tabs every single hour to maintain your focus. These super small environmental tweaks basically make the right behavior the default behavior. As you start trying these tiny habits out, keep this amazing piece of advice front and center. You should be far more concerned with your current trajectory than with your current results. The results you're seeing in your life today, they are just a lagging indicator of your old habits. They're just the tip of the iceberg. So focus entirely on refining those daily systems and celebrating those tiny wins, instead of agonizing over an immediate lack of perfection. Remember, being in the valley of disappointment does not mean you're failing. It just means you're storing up potential. Every single time you automate a savings transfer, or go for a quick walk to release that irisin hormone, or just switch on your desk light to focus, you're heating that ice cube up one more degree. So, I will leave you with this. What small, highly repeatable action are you going to commit to today to trigger your future breakthrough? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.